Good day. My name is Glenn O'Cray, and I'd like to welcome you to this session of Through the Arsenal Gates. I'm going to introduce you to a person that has made history, is making history, and will make history. All of you might not know him, but I'm guessing that a lot of you do know him. Dr. Glenn, how's that for a fine name? Maleyko. He's the superintendent of schools, and I'm truly honored to have him as our guest today. Dr. Maleyko, tell us where you grew up.
Well, first thing, I appreciate you having me on the show, and it's nice to meet another Glenn with two N's, as we were saying. So I grew up in Windsor in Canada, actually. But I would say that I kind of grew up on both sides of the Canadian-American border. My mother is Polish-American, born and raised in Detroit, just outside of Hamtramck, and my father's Polish-Canadian. And so I've spent many hours in where she grew up, and many days with my grandparents who have now passed away. We have deep roots on both sides of the border. I would say that I even have a larger U.S. family. My grandfather, who passed away in 2012, was very proud of the fact that he served in the U.S. Navy. He was in the Pacific during the World War II, and I heard many stories from him. So I have roots there, and then I had my grandfather on my father's side that was in the Canadian Royal Army. So there's a history on both sides of the border.
Very good. Now, I'm assuming you're legal here? You're not being paid under the table or anything?
No. I was born a citizen of Canadian passport. I have a Canadian passport and I have an American passport. The American government recognizes you primarily as a U.S. citizen, so I was born a citizen of both countries because of the fact that my mother was American, my dad was Canadian. So I'm allowed to cross as needed.
Very good. Who was the most influential person in your life?
Growing up, I would just say, look, it was educators and coaches. I grew up, and I would say I have one in particular, Mr. Clifton, who was my sixth grade teacher. I have, who has passed away, a coach, Guy Cottrell, who lived in the Windsor area. But it was more than just them. It was the figures that helped you along the way. And hockey was a big part of my life, baseball and hockey, but mainly hockey. And so, coaches had an impact. Of course, my parents did as well. I've had a lot of people looking out for me as growing up. And then when I got into the professional world, I've had different mentors. I would say the late, great Brian Whiston, former superintendent, I was on his cabinet. And unfortunately, recently, Dr. John Utters had passed away, and he was an academic leader. And I've been a part of the administration in Dearborn going back to 2002. So I was on his team. He did hire me as a principal. So I've had other figures that have led. And I would say when I was a teacher, I had Irene Blackburn and Nada Fawani and Nadia Yeoman. So I've had kind of a lot of people, depending on the stage of life that I was going through.
Yeah.
But mentors were important to me.
Okay. Now, when you were 12, what did you think you wanted to do for a living?
Well, like any youth that's into sports, I thought I was going to be a professional hockey player.
Were you good?
I was pretty good. I played competitive, the AAA level, and I ended up playing up to junior B hockey in Canada, which was fairly competitive, just below the junior A OHL. But the reality is once I turned about 16, 15, 16, I knew I probably wasn't going to the pro route, realistic. Now, my brother made it a lot further. He was actually drafted in the NHL, played in the pros, didn't make the NHL, but played at a pretty competitive level, a lot of the East Coast League teams over here. So I followed a lot of his hockey when I finished playing. I played up till my second year in university. And in Canada, the university, you can play hockey over there. So I did my undergrad at the University of Windsor. But the junior hockey is very popular in Canada. So I ended up playing junior B for the Leamington Flyers.
At what point in your life did you decide you wanted to be a teacher?
So I had initially, when I first went into college, I was considering possibly law school. But when I stopped playing competitive hockey, I then coached while I was in college. And at that point, it was through my coaching that I decided that I wanted to change my career path and go into education. My father was a lawyer, his father was a lawyer, and so I was kind of following in the family footsteps, and then changed it along the way. So I would say the coaching hockey was had a huge impact on me. So
What makes a good coach?
well, first thing is you got to care about your players. You got to have a relationship and a connection, and obviously, having that skill set and that knowledge, depending on what level. I've coached at all kinds of levels now since I've had my children. I've played hockey, both my daughter and my son, and I've coached from AAA competitive to non-competitive. So it just depends on what level you're at. But like at the higher competitive level, having that experience as a player, I think helps as well. But just the ability and dedication to want to make a difference in the life of either a student or a player.
What's your philosophy of life?
So I'm the glass half full kind of person. I'm always the optimist. When I see a challenge and go through some adversity, like we're all going through right now with COVID, obviously no one wants to be part of this pandemic, but having gone through some adverse situation, you become stronger. I'm also about the team. I'm more of a shared leadership. I would say situational leadership. But my philosophy is generally building consensus and working as a team. When you're in crisis, though, like we have been the last year and a half, sometimes you also have to step up and just make that decision after you get input from your team. I think we've built a great team, and so my philosophy is teamwork, working together. You're stronger for having done that. And again, trying to be an optimist and keeping things positive. I also think that building relationships are critical, whether that be with your students, which to me is huge, being in the schools, with your staff, with your union heads, with community members. I think that's very important, as we deal with not only our profession, but life in general.
Tell us about your presence on social media.
So I started my social media many years ago, but I wasn't really a huge social media person on Facebook. When I became the HR director, I started working with Twitter. And then what happened is when I became superintendent in 2015, I formed a student advisory council. At that time, I had an Instagram account, but I'm mainly active on Twitter and, like I said, Facebook. The students then encouraged me to go into Instagram. They encouraged me how to take the photos. My first year as superintendent, what I realized is they wanted the picture with the superintendent as a selfie. We have our Students First sign, which is our vision, and I go all around with that sign. I have it usually in my pocket. We pull it out, and the students want to get in a picture, and it really, just brands Dearborn Schools. It's a positive, being whether it's at the football game in the student section or possibly in a kindergarten class. So students have trained me with Instagram, to be honest. I did not know how to use it very well, and I've gotten a lot better, but that is probably now my largest following. But our social media, I work in tandem with the district social media, but it is kind of nice, and I think I was mentioning before when we came in here, that helped, it has to match with being there in that relationship in person as well. You can't just be social media, that's my philosophy. So you want to be down to earth and you want to interact with students. But the fact that they also know me on social media helps too, and I'm proud of the fact that they know who I am by name when I go into the buildings. They like to have fun. My first year, they wanted me to cancel school for snow days. That was the big thing. When are you going to cancel? Now I'm going into school and I'm asking them, do you want to go back virtual? No. We want to stay in school. All right, so I'm promoting getting your vaccine, do the mitigation, whether that be in our schools, it's under the mask order from Wayne County in our district, or other mitigation that we use. And I've presented on this at national superintendent conferences, and I authored in a magazine as well, a journal. I work closely with David Mustin, our communications director, and Miss Katie Hetrick, who's in our district as well, and others. And I would say a lot of our administrators help, but students help me too to pass on that message. So it's really just a positive, and I know the students enjoy being part of it, and so I'm happy to engage them in that manner.
Very good. Tell us your relationship with the president of Henry Ford College.
First of all, I want to thank the board because they hired him, and he's a great leader. We have a great partnership, and it's benefiting our students. We're saving in the millions of dollars tuition for parents. We have a partnership that we've built. There's a trust there. We are working together in collaboration, and that was part of the previous bond that we were looking to expand. We have a state model, but we're looking to expand our early colleges, our dual enrollment, and what we call our collegiate academy, where students can take, they can come in, get a high school diploma and an associate's degree in 5 years paid for between our partnership by Dearborn Public Schools and Henry Ford College. He's a great leader, a great advocate, and I appreciate his partnership. And I think the two of us together set the tone that this is important, but it goes beyond that. The board also does, and I appreciate the board and their leadership allowing both of us to do that as well.
Very good. Now, tell us your path. Where did you get your first teaching job?
So I started in Dearborn in '95 as a substitute teacher. At the time, it was Doug Pretty and Mr. Kozicki were running the HR department, and I started as a substitute teacher at Oakman. That was my first assignment. I ended up doing my student teaching at Oakman. I finished my teaching degree at the University of Detroit Mercy.
Yeah.
And so I got a placement at Oakman, and I would sub a lot. I would also substitute teach at Salina, Maples, and Becker were a few of the other schools, and really all over the district, with the East End, the West End. And what ended up happening was I got offered a position at Salina. And so my first full-time position was in '97 at Salina. I ended up spending 12 years total at Salina because I became an assistant principal. And then when the campus, it was converted during the 2002 bond that was passed, we built the new middle school, the intermediate building. So you had a preschool through third grade building and a fourth through eighth grade building. So I worked for Nadia Yeomans, who ended up assuming the preschool to third grade principalship. And I applied for the intermediate school and became the principal there, and I stayed there until 2009.
Which is harder, being a substitute teacher or working on the assembly line?
I actually did work on the assembly line in Chrysler as a part-time student.
Is that right?
So when I was doing my student teaching at Oakman, I would get in the car after, and I'd go work the evening as a student worker, when we would fill in for the absence.
Yeah.
They all have their challenges depending, but substitute teaching, yeah. I mean, that's where you really kind of, you get your passion, but that's where, some students, they're challenged because they know you're not the permanent teacher, so I can relate to that. I taught in the elementary, and I really loved my time as teaching. But I had people that encouraged me, as I was mentioning mentors before, that wanted me to go on and get other leadership degrees or to get involved. And I would just naturally get involved. And I think a lot of that stems from my coaching and my athletics. So a lot of that philosophy came from playing sports.
Were you a good student out of curiosity?
I was a very disciplined student, but like anyone, you go through different stages, I think. At elementary, it kind of came naturally, and then high school, I realized, in order to do well, you got to put in the work ethic. I met my wife in college, and we ended up getting married a few after we graduated, or I graduated, and I would say I kind of really took it serious to school, and I would say any of the degrees that I received, I have 4 degrees, including the advanced degree from Wayne State, the PhD, but a lot of it is just hard work and determination, being disciplined, not just cramming at the end, but doing things along the way. And that's what I advocate for students. That's what I advocate for my 2 children, my daughter and my son as well.
Tell us more about your values.
I believe in core values. Dearborn Schools stands for core values. I believe that honesty is very important. As I mentioned, consistency in relationships are critical as well. I think people want to be treated fair. And that's, I think, under my leadership as superintendent, I think that's one thing that people would say is, I'm very consistent. I don't get into games. I'm honest, and I'll be upfront. The same token, I have no problem having any kind of conversation that is necessary. That may come from I was in human resources, but we can do it in a very pleasant, cordial manner in how we address different situations. But my core values are just being honest, having integrity, and promoting Dearborn schools and the city of Dearborn. Now, like I said, 95. So I've been here a long time, working in the district, and so my values, I'm very passionate about diversity, allowing and promoting equity in schools and in the community.
Now, you had taught at Salina and at Maple School. How did you fit in? How did that work?
At the time I was just excited to teach. I think it was just kind of natural. I came in and my students, like I said, if students and parents know that you are looking out for their children, they're appreciative. Salina, I had a class where I had some students that I know had come from the Middle East, and a lot of the parents couldn't speak English, but they knew that I was out there advocating for their students, and they were very appreciative. I know one or two in particular that came from their families had been in a concentration camp after the first Gulf War in the early 90s. And so I think I just fit in right away. I had to learn in Salina, having a large immigrant population, that always has been. At the time it was Yemeni students, there were some Iraqi students that were coming in, and I know there were other ethnic groups, before my time in that community. And I just think that parents were very appreciative, very respectful. A lot of them maybe had come into the country and they just wanted their children to be successful. And it's very rewarding. Now what I see is I have students that I had as a teacher or when I was principal there that are now adults and they have professions in the community and their children are in the school district. That's the biggest reward to see their success. So that would be my biggest reward, is to see success of your students in schools and beyond, in society, really.
You also were a principal at Duval for a while. Compare and contrast Duval with St. Maples.
So, or Salina, because Salina I spent most of my time.
Yeah.
So I would say this. So when I left Salina, I really didn't want to leave. I was just tied to the community, 12 years, plus the substitute teaching, really you could say 14 years total. And I loved what I was doing. But Brian Whiston approached me, and sometimes it's good for a change to grow your leadership. And so the transfer was that Mr. Whiston put me on was fantastic. Duval was a very rich community. I have all these ties back at Salina, but I have a lot of ties, and I still have a lot of friendships from Duval. And a lot of those students that were first grade and kindergartners are now in college that were when I was principal there. And I still have relationships with them, and I would say it was a very tight-knit community. With the PTA was very active, and they'd have the ice cream social, they'd have the Halloween dance, and the parents were just, it was a really nice community. And my children were very young at the time, and they would come to a lot of the events, the movie nights, the interacting, the Halloween dance. I think the first thing that I went to, and I realized, every school has tradition, so the Halloween dance. I'm like, well, how can I, fit in? And I remember, I'm a diehard Detroit Red Wings fan. So one of the things that Salina students tell me that were in my class, 3rd and 5th grade, is that they are Red Wing fans for life, even though they didn't grow up with hockey, because I just advocated. I had the banner in there. I mean, they knew that.
That's cute.
And they tell me now they're adults, right? So when I transferred over to Duval, people would check your resume, they find out who you are, and look, I'm a Red Wing fan, diehard. I'm a diehard Detroit all sports, but hockey's my main thing. And I remember them saying, and the day that I got the transfer, that I announced to the community I was leaving, was the day that it was Game 7 of the Stanley Cup in 2009, Pittsburgh against Detroit. So I was a little upset that I'm transferring, and nothing against the Vault. It was just, I was leaving Salina. So I'm like, I'm going to go home and watch the Wings win the Cup. And I happened to be at a game earlier in the series, and the Wings were in the lead. And that was the game they lost in Game 7. So I had a couple parents that said, and I didn't realize it at the time, but the mascot, or maybe I realized it, but I got a couple parents that said, hey, what do you think about coming over here to the Penguins? Pittsburgh Penguins versus. So what I did was, at the Halloween dance, I made sure I dressed up. I was a Penguin.
Oh, very good.
So.
That's cute. Very good. Very good. Yeah. Tell us your best story of being a teacher.
Yeah, I would just say it's the appreciation of so I kind of mentioned it before. But when you see the success of your students, whether it's that year and they achieved something within reading or math, but then it's the long term too. It's that they're successful now because they've done well in middle school and high school and beyond, in college and beyond, because really we want to prepare them for society. So to me, that is one thing. Now, I will tell you one story that had a dramatic impact, and I'm not going to say, this is kind of a realization of maybe help form my opinions. I had a student in 3rd grade, and he was drawing a picture in his journal, and it was somebody was getting shot. And I'm like, oh my gosh, what is this? Obviously you want to look into it. And he drew a picture, and I called the social worker, because obviously you want someone to find out what this is. You'd be concerned. And what happened was the student who came from Iraq, he was Iraqi, he came from Iraq after the first Gulf War, and he was drawing in his journal about his uncle who got outside of a concentration camp, was killed. And this is what the social worker then reported to me. So the one thing that I grew up in a middle class family, that was just had a big impact on me, because what I realized then was that, as an educator, I don't know exactly what that student had to deal with when they were overseas or whatever, just as I didn't know what maybe students in poverty have had to deal with. Some of them were in poverty, some weren't, in the students that I taught. But the one thing, even though I could try to empathize with them, I couldn't exactly understand their situation. But the one thing was through education. If we work extremely hard, we can help those students by providing the highest quality education we can to allow them to be successful beyond elementary, beyond middle, and in life. And I think that was something that was a realization. And since then, I've been a big advocate for ESL education. I'm not certified, but I have a lot of experience. And just promoting diversity, I think it's a crucial thing. So kind of gave you a story that maybe was just telling in my career and kind of did have an impact. But I have a lot of, I interact with, go back to social media, I have a lot of my former students that will send me messages. That's rewarding, their children,
Yeah,
So.
Very good, very good. You were director of human resources at one time, and any good stories from that?
Working with Brian Whiston, I think, was, a huge impact on me. He hired me. I would say that's when I came in as well, because we had budget issues at the time. We had just come off, I was a principal at the time, but there were shortages within the budget. And there was a major cut back, the economic times of the 2008-9 crash. And so the tax revenue wasn't there. And so we were negotiating for concessions within the contracts. But within that, I was able to build relationships. I was now the chief negotiator, sitting at the table negotiating these contracts between the teachers union, the non-instructional. We also had to do, some of our unions were joint with the Henry Ford College. And so I just think it gave me a lot of experience. And I was now on a K-12 level, working with different staff members, 21,000 students, but employees almost 2,700 when you go full and part-time, 14 to 1,500 in the teacher union. So it was a huge responsibility, and I think, to be honest, working with Brian Whiston on his cabinet is what really prepared me for the next level, which is to be a superintendent. Especially in a district our size, you have to have that kind of experience in cabinet. Central office is a whole different situation versus in the buildings. And so I think that building experience has been well for me, so I can understand and appreciate and understand where people are coming from. And I've been there and done that kind of thing. But then having that ability to work with a mentor to prepare myself for superintendent was also critical.
Very good. Now, the last millage failed. You want to talk about that?
So, we did run into some opposition. We were the only things on the ballot, the only thing that was during that election time. I think it was approximately 400 votes swing. So there was a lot of support. It was very close. Having said that, we moved forward. We have a lot of old buildings that are approaching, I'm sure you're aware, here, 100 years old, and we have a lot that are 80 years old. And so infrastructure needs to be upgraded. Right now, one of the things, we just came out of the largest summer program in the history of Dearborn schools, and the largest in the state, I believe, was 8,400 students we had this summer. But one of the things we need to do is upgrade, both because of COVID and just to have air conditioning, is our HVAC systems. So that was part of what was there. We are now receiving federal funding, so we may be going out in the future, depending on, we're going to look at a potential bond down the line. there was an opposition, a group that didn't want taxes increased, but I've also heard that some people were saying, go for new buildings versus upgrading the old. But you have a lot of differing opinions, so we'll see where that goes. Maybe this next proposal will probably be better. And we're also using some of that one-time ESSER dollars through the federal government, which was COVID relief. That it's the first time the federal government is allowing us to use it for things like infrastructure, just HVAC. It's limited, but at least we can use it. And that's one of the funding problems in Michigan, is that you do have to go for the vote in order to upgrade your infrastructure, because your general fund budget cannot sustain it. And so we do need upgrades, but we're being responsible within our current budget as well.
What's the biggest challenge that you have faced as superintendent?
I would say right now, and all superintendents are going to say the same thing, it's this COVID pandemic. None of us, we're educators and leaders, and the amount of meetings I'm in for, epidemiology type things, there's a lot of opinions out there, a lot of the things that we're doing out maybe on a broader national level have been politicized. And what we're trying to do is make sure schools are safe for students. Last year, we didn't know certain things that we knew. So I would say, my entire team would probably say the same thing. I think the teachers would. Teachers are parents as well. They worked hard for the students, but we were virtual for quite a bit of the year last year until we opened up hybrid. That's why we were so excited to have the summer program come into play. So I would say the dealing with the COVID has been huge. And we did have one of the first 2 cases in Michigan at Whitmore Bowles, where I ended up closing that school initially when we didn't know a lot about COVID. Prior to the governor, a few days, I believe it was 2 days later, then closed the state, schools across the state. So it's been very challenging. We've had to follow the health guidelines and the CDC and all the things that we're doing. And we know more, we're promoting vaccines, but then, we got polarizing opinions. So I will literally get, it happens at the board meeting. You'll get somebody that will come and will say, look, you guys, last year, for example, we need to have kids in-person instruction. You need to do that. The next comment or the next email, and I get a lot of them, is no, it's not safe. You should not have anybody in school. You might have someone that would say, well, I hope that you're playing athletics. And then the next person says, well, athletics isn't safe because it's spreading the COVID. I'm getting the same thing on the masks. There's differing opinions on that. So the bottom line is, I take all that into consideration and I respond to people, but we've generally had to do what we think is right between myself, the board, and my administration. We have fantastic nurses, and we're constantly in contact with the Wayne County Health Department. We are the 3rd largest district in the state, so there's an enormous responsibility. And so for me, it's just making sure that all students are safe, not just from COVID, but from all other issues we faced, like gun violence in schools. That was the bigger issue prior to, COVID coming. So that's definitely the challenge. It's been I would say it's in education, it has been, but it's also been challenging just for everybody, right? Sure. So,
in 5 words, what do you want to be remembered for as you move into the next life?
I would say that I was about students. I cared about students. Maybe I'll cheat on your 5 words.
Doesn't know how to count.
You know what? I was all about making a difference for the benefit of students. That's really what I want to be remembered, and that I did it with the highest level of integrity. You'll never see me change who I am. My integrity will be what it is. So integrity and making a difference for students. So there you go. There's a couple under
good.
5. I cheated a little.
He has to go back to 5th grade on his math. But, ladies and gentlemen, I hope you enjoyed this conversation with Dr. Glenn Maleyko, Superintendent of the Dearborn Public Schools. He's a fine gentleman. If you enjoyed this program, tell all of your friends. If you didn't enjoy it, keep it to yourself. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you, Glenn.